that many police officers have been reluctant to use force. And if they do use force, what reassurances can he give them?
Exactly.
Can I pay my tribute to the West Midlands Police, who I think did an excellent job in trying to contain some very unpleasant events in Birmingham and surrounding cities. It was right for the courts to sit overnight, because those guilty have to be punished quickly. But what discussions have we had with the Justice Secretary to actually make sure that our prisons have got the capacity to deal with what they're receiving?
The Honourable Lady raises a very important point, and I was in her constituency yesterday. The discussions that we've had at Cobra, where Justice Ministers were present at all of the meetings, was to make sure, A, that we had enough capacity in police cells, then B, we had enough capacity in the Magistrates' Court system, and the Solihull Court has been sitting in over a 24-hour period, and C, that we have enough capacity in our prisons to deal with it. And I've been assured on all of those levels that the work is there and the capacity is available.
Mr. Philip Hollowbone will be imposed on the parents of those juveniles who are prosecuted for being involved in these riots. Shouldn't parents be held responsible for their children's behaviour in the courts?
I think the Honourable Gentleman is right. There are parenting orders that can be used, and I hope they'll be widely used on this occasion.
Luciana Berger.
Yesterday and the day before, homes and businesses in my constituency were vandalised by a very small minority. It was the majority that came together in Liverpool on Tuesday and Wednesday mornings to clean up the mess. But there is some damage that couldn't be swept away. The Prime Minister said the government will ensure the police have the funds to meet the cost of any legitimate compensation claim. Will the Prime Minister confirm that all of these funds will be in addition to Merseyside Police and other police authorities' existing budgets?
That's exactly what I've said, that you've got the Riot Damages Act, so businesses, even if they're uninsured, can apply to the relevant police force, and the Home Office will stand behind that force. That is obviously a scheme that's been in place for decades. In addition to that, there are, of course, the two schemes I've announced today, one of which will directly impact on her constituency because it was affected by the riots.
Andrew Bridgen.
That guy there, that's
the Prime Minister agree with me
no,
that
all
what
the way
we've witnessed
in
on
the green,
some of our major
sitting
towns
all
and
the way back down there.
cities is nothing more or less than pure criminality and thuggery. And those
Yeah.
who seek to excuse this behaviour being down to deprivation or poverty or crime
in the green chair.
are themselves symptomatic of the no blame, no responsibility culture which has undermined our society and led us to this sorry state.
I think the Honourable Gentleman makes a powerful point. I've actually been struck, though, at meeting, whether it's local people or community leaders or police officers, everyone has been making the point that this is about criminality and not about political protest.
Tom Watson. Mr. Speaker, after the riot in West Bromwich, local traders told me that they feared the emergence of a new class of criminal consumer. BlackBerry-enabled, self-organised groups whose newfound collectivism had diminished their fear of the police and increased their contempt for the law. Their clarion cry to the Prime Minister was, please reverse the planned reduction of 1,000 uniformed police officers in the West Midlands. I'm sorry he doesn't like to hear that. If he's going to give them an answer no, would he at least agree to keep the matter under review?
What I say to the Honourable Gentleman is that the first half of his question, which was all about the new technology that the criminal is using, had bore no relation to the second half of the question, which is about resources. What matters is, are we going to give the police the technology either to trace people on Twitter or BlackBerry Messenger, or, as I said in my statement, on occasion to close it down? That's the step we should be taking, rather than immediately launching into a discussion of resources in 4 years' time.
Charlie Elphick.
Mr. Speaker, may I urge on the Prime Minister, not just in terms of the amount of compensation and business continuity assistance, but also the speed. Time is of the essence, getting these businesses back on their feet so we can have more jobs and money in communities that so badly need them.
My honourable friend makes a very good point, and I can say that my honourable friend, member for Hertford and Stortford, will, out of his office, be giving a one-stop shop advice to all members of Parliament who've got affected businesses who want to see that money flow quickly. It's very important not just to set up these schemes, but make sure the money is paid rapidly.
Mike Gapes.
Because there are 1 million 11 to 19-year-olds in London. The Prime Minister has said a lot about children and young people, but he hasn't in an hour and a half said anything positive. Can he take this opportunity? Can he take this opportunity to make clear that the vast majority of young people are decent, law-abiding, good people, and they are appalled by the stigmatisation they're getting from the media, and they are also appalled, they are afraid, they are not criminals, they are just in fear at this time.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, in my statement I said that what had happened was in no way representative of the brilliant young people we have in our country. And let me just say, as I understand it, tomorrow there'll be a meeting of people, I think in Westminster, saying very specifically this was not done in their name. And I applaud that and all of the other social action initiatives where people have stood up and said this wasn't about me or for me or anything to do with me.
Dr. Julian Hupert.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has linked social media to violence. Will he join me in congratulating the huge number of people who've used social media for positive activities, organising clear-ups, for the police, and I pay particular tribute to Cam's cops, telling people what is happening, getting rid of rumours? Will he accept those positive issues, and will he accept that clamping down on social media could have very damaging consequences?
The Honourable Gentleman makes a good point, which is why the Home Secretary is going to explore this with the social media companies, with other services as well. The key thing, though, I would make this point, is the police were facing a new circumstance where rioters were using the BlackBerry Messenger service, a closed network, so they knew where they were going to loot next and the police couldn't keep up with them. We've got to examine that and work out how to get ahead of them.
Gloria De Piero.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has said that CCTV has proved highly valuable, so can he explain how he might make it easier for communities who want more CCTV to get more CCTV?
Well, by making funds available. One of the first things I did in politics as a Home Office Special Advisor was set up one of the first ever CCTV challenge funds so communities could invest in it.
Robert Buckland.
Mr. Speaker, would my right honourable friend agree with me that when it comes to punishment, the courts need to consider the issue of compensation of victims at the heart of their deliberations, whatever the income or means of the offender? And that secondly, the powers to confiscate the proceeds of crime should be deployed to their fullest effect by the courts.
I agree with what the Honourable Gentleman says. He speaks with great expertise as he's practised in the criminal law himself. There may also be opportunities in the forthcoming sentencing bill to look at even further powers of confiscation to make sure we really get after these criminals.
Chukaramuna.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Sunday and Monday night we saw violence, looting and ransacking in my constituency and my borough. There have been some out in the country who have sought to attribute these acts to particular racial or religious groups. Now, whilst we may not know the exact causes of all of these events around the country, will the Prime Minister agree with me that we do know that it was people of all different religions and all different races who were responsible for this, and that to racialise this issue is gravely wrong and does our country a great misservice?
Now, I think the Honourable Gentleman makes an important point. This wasn't about race, it was about crime.
Mr. Stephen Williams.
My constituency, Bristol West, not only had violent disorder this week, but also in April as well. And we very much appreciate the strong words the Prime Minister has used today. In dealing with the deeper issues in society, will you agree with me that people who feel themselves marginalised in society are much more likely to first listen to and then respect those strong words if people at the other end of the social spectrum, not just in the boardroom as the leader of the opposition said, but rather more popular people in society as well, do not display such venal and conspicuous consumption behaviour that sets such a bad example for people who are following these people?
Of course, the Honourable Gentleman is right, but I think in setting out, as it were, a hierarchy of message, it is very important to get across that there's simply no justification for the sort of looting that we saw. There's no excuse for that.
Pat McFadden.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for coming to Wolverhampton yesterday and meeting retailers who were affected by what happened, including Mr. Sham Sharma, whose computer shop was ransacked and looted. What we have seen in recent days is what happens when order breaks down. When order breaks down, there is no liberty. When order breaks down, there is fear. The Prime Minister is right to say that those who did this are responsible, but governments also have responsibilities. So can I ask him, will he reconsider his government's plans to make CCTV harder for our communities to use instead of easier? And we also look again at the issue of police numbers, because the idea that the budget cuts he's making won't affect numbers may look good as a line to take, but I have to tell him, it will not convince the public.
To the Honourable Gentleman. Prime Minister.
What we are doing is making sure that CCTV is properly regulated, but we don't want to restrict its use. CCTV has got a vitally important in the fight against crime, and I'm 100% committed to it. Can I say how much sense I thought the Right Honourable Gentleman spoke yesterday when he talked about the very fine line there can be between order and disorder, and the importance of giving support to our police, including the excellent work done by the West Midlands Force.
Order. I'm very keen to accommodate the interest of colleagues, but we are now starting to get mini speeches, entirely understandable, but that's what we're getting, and it does absorb a lot of time. Can I please appeal to colleagues for brevity, a legendary example of which I know will now be provided by the Honourable Member for Bury St Edmunds, Mr David Ruffley.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary has said that £1.5 billion a year can be made in police efficiency savings. Can the Prime Minister tell us if the Home Office will mandate collaboration to ensure that these savings are delivered, thus protecting the front line, which is what we all want to see?
The Honourable Gentleman makes an important point. The HMIC have said those savings are available, and they weren't taking into account the pay freeze for police officers and the increased pension contributions, or indeed some of the extra work that we've done to cut paperwork. And that is why I feel so confident in saying that on average 6% cash reductions over 4 years should lead to no reduction in visible policing.
Karen Buck.
It's a gratitude to our police services this week, but crisis policing is not an alternative to embedded, sustained community policing. So I was very disappointed visiting damage in my constituency to talk to safer neighbourhood sergeants who are losing their jobs today, who are being made to reapply for their jobs today as part of 300 safer neighbourhood job losses in London alone. The Prime Minister says when circumstances change, we must change. He must now change his policy of damaging the leadership to London safer neighbourhood police.